Okay, lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey. Now, on the test, something that you want to start doing actually even now is thinking about how you are going to answer questions on the test. Whenever I give you lines from this poem or from another one, this is here. Okay, remind me that you came in late. When you're in, I'll give you lines from the poems, and then what you will need to do is give me like the title and the author, but you don't want to write lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey, blah, 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 reflections, blah, 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 blah. You'll just need to write Wordsworth, and you'll need to write Tintern Abbey for this one. Okay? We're just abbreviating because I don't want to read all that stuff. So, all I need to know is that you know that it's from Wordsworth and Tintern Abbey. Okay? So that's those, when you get lines from this poem, that would be how you would write the answer. Okay? And we are on our second day of Wordsworth here. And so,
make sure he knows that we
got last time through the top of page 793. Once again, we are in Volume E of the Norton Anthology of World Literature, Volume E, and I'm at the top of page 793 with William Wordsworth's Lines Composed a Few Miles above Tintern Abbey. And we had talked about, so far, we had talked about the fact that he does remember what he had experienced 5 years before, right? And so 5 years ago, he was experiencing a spot of time. You could say that that moment that he experienced 5 years ago was a spot of time. Spot of time that then he remembers, so that he is able, even in those 5 years when he's not there, he is able to remember them, and he can write poetry about it. Okay, and do you remember his definition of poetry? Do you remember Wordsworth's? Yes.
Spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility.
Excellent, excellent. The spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. And I wrote that on the board last time. And you need to know that word for word. I'm trying to figure S-O-P-F-R-T. I don't know. Trying to find a mnemonic device, but you might come up with one. But this is that very romantic way of looking at things. It's spontaneous. It's an overflow of feelings. That would not be very proper in Pope's Rape of the Lock. We must all be composed, unless, of course, someone cuts our hair. Terrible to think of. You cut your hair. No, this is the spontaneous overflow of feelings, but they're also recollected in tranquility because he's going to remember it over those 5 years. But now, he says not only did he remember those things, but, top of 793, these sensations sweet, felt in the blood and felt along the heart, passing even into my purer mind, with tranquil restoration. Feelings, too, of unremembered pleasure. Unremembered pleasure, what's going on here? He says, and I'm skipping down to about 35. nor less I trust to them I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime. And this is the next thing that we want to pay attention to with regard to the Romantics, and that is the aspect of the sublime. What is the sublime? All the Romantics are kind of trying to get to something called the sublime. Okay? When you think about the word sublime, what does it mean to you?
The best.
The best? Okay. What do you think about when you think of the sublime? How does it make you feel?
Something pretty.
Pardon?
Something pretty.
Something pretty.
Amazing.
Amazing. Amazing is a good word, yes. Amazing. To some extent, yes, the best. But it's not, like, you do not want your wedding to be sublime. You don't want a sublime day for your wedding, I don't think. Because the sublime is a little bit, it's not necessarily pleasant. It's an experience with, or an experience of, let me see, I'm looking for something. It's an experience of the transcendent, or an experience of something that is, there's a statement that Alan Tate makes that says about a couple of particular poets, but it's the idea that the poet needs a world bigger than this one to live in. Okay, it's the idea that, you know, if you've been in Alexander Pope's world of it's all manners and it's all rational and it's all explainable through empirical science, that gets kind of old. If everything can be explained by Newton and Darwin and all of that, where is the spirit and the life force? What gives life to everything? What do you do with those things that are not tangible, that you can't measure? You can't use empirical science to explain. And so because the Enlightenment kind of, or the Age of Reason kind of said, okay, if you can't touch it, weigh it, feel it, hear it, like with your ears, those kinds of things. We can't talk about it, because how do we know about it? How do you explain God? How do you even describe God? Somebody try to tell me about God. Who is God? Who's God? Or what's God?
He is.
Okay.
He's everything. But you're right. It's a hard thing to explain. I mean, he's what created what we
That's
are.
one thing you can really say about God.
He's 3 in 1.
Sorry,
He's numbers?
No.
Wow, we need to all switch to math.
You're making this hard.
He's everything?
I mean, he is. He's everything that you see.
But by being told previous people.
Oh, boy.
He's something that you can't see that created everything in 7 days.
How do you know that?
I mean, you don't really know. You just gotta believe.
It's called faith.
Just going back to the definition of sublime, it's basically something that you want to understand but can't necessarily understand.
Yeah. So it's kind of an encounter with, part of it is it requires a momentary suspension of reason. A momentary suspension of reason, okay? So you have to, it requires a momentary and to encounter it, so you suspend your reason and you have an encounter with I would call it something transcendent.
So this is Sublime?
Yeah, kind of my explanation of it. With something transcendent, but, okay, and this is where Romantic poetry gets a bad rap. It's like, oh, you see God in a butterfly, or you see God in the clover flower, or, oh, it's just so nice. You know, it's sweet and nice. Not in the Sublime. The encounter with the Sublime is more the powerful force of God. It's more an encounter, it's typical of like Gothic or the grotesque or something where, you know, you're seeing the dark side of God. It would be appropriate in storms if you've got, you know, the force of God in a storm in a poem. Okay? Now,
Fear of the Lord.
the fear of the Lord, yes. There's one guy who encounters God in this way in the Old Testament. He goes, okay, it's bigger than I am. One particular guy that encounters God and it really kind of fits, and that's Job when he encounters God in the whirlwind, right? All of his friends have been trying to tell him, well, you know, it's probably because you did this, you deserve that. And because you did this, you deserve that, which is very rational, okay? It's very much legalistic, fill in the blanks, check off the boxes kind of thing. And Job says, look, And he says, but he wants to ask God questions, and then God speaks to him out of the whirlwind, right? How would you feel if you encountered God in a whirlwind? Scared. Yeah, it's pretty, that would be intimidating, right? So it's that sense that there is something bigger. Now, at this point, I want us to turn the page, go over to page 800, and the world is too much with us, okay? The world. Now, if you saw God all of a sudden in a whirlwind, or if you saw God all of a sudden in here in some big kind of, if you saw God in here at all, like suddenly you experienced him in some natural force, supernatural force, really, in the room, what would your physiological response be?
This isn't real.
To hide your face.
Hide your face? Yeah. Think it's not real, I'm losing my mind. What would your heart do? What would your breath do?
Stop.
Yeah! Okay, wait, okay, excellent. Okay, wait, we have to go back then. Okay, we have to go back, 793, sorry. You just, that's exactly it. Your heart would stop. Sorry, we'll do the world is too much with us in a second, but that, your heart would stop. You would kind of stop breathing. You'd probably hold your breath, right? Go. I kind of wonder, can I talk about the lion? Okay, Niece, you fought with a lion, right? What happened when you were fighting? I mean, it would be like that, I would think. Yeah?
It was like...
It was what?
It was like, I have to get up. I mean, at one point you don't know what you're doing. You just know that you're just doing something to get the lion over. Like, you just want to be done. You just want to take that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it.
It's like you've just got to survive. You've got to... Did you kill the lion?
No, I didn't kill.
You just got away from him?
Yes.
Just the fact that he got away, that's kind of a huge deal.
That is incredible that you fought with a lion. How did you get away?
There are some people, like, we went with elders out there.
Yeah?
Just start shooting guns, so they got afraid.
But you were actually like
But I was afraid.
You were fighting with the lion. And his response, I wish we had that on tape, he goes, yeah. He was fighting with the lion, and he goes, yeah. I mean, that's just, I mean, this awe, you're being overpowered, you know, you're thinking, wow, I can't imagine that. I mean, that's just, but like you said, you kind of stop thinking and you just kind of do, right? And the same sort of thing, if you see God in a whirlwind or suddenly God appears in the room, it's like your breath, everything stops and you're just there. You're kind of all present to it. And so if you look at this on page 793, where we were at line 30, let's start in the middle of 35, nor less I trust to them I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime. It's this encounter with something transcendent, something bigger than ourselves, that blessed mood in which the burden and the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened. Suddenly you encounter God, and wow, the grocery bill doesn't seem so important, right? A few hours ago, you might have been going, I can't believe the electric bill costs so much, or all your groceries have gone up. But suddenly, all of that is just lightened. You see God. You come in contact with your mortality. You realize, oh, I'm human, and there's a limit to what I can do, but there is a bigger power out there. That serene and blessed mood on which the affections gently lead us on until, and so you have suspended your reason, you're coming in contact with something that is above, beyond, and the affections gently lead us on until the breath of this corporeal frame. What is a corporeal frame? What is breath? Breathing, yes. The breath of this, do you know what a corpus is, or corporeal, what is what is Corpus Christi?
Oh, town?
No. Okay. It is. But it's named for, what?
Oh, it's a Catholic thing.
Yes.
I don't know.
Body of Christ. Okay, corpus is body. Yes, that's what it's, yes. So it's, yes, Corpus Christi celebrations are the celebration of the body and blood of Christ. Okay, so corpus, the breath of this corporeal bodily frame. Okay, so until your breath of your body and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended. You've got the breath and you've got the blood are almost, what does it mean if your breath and your blood are almost suspended?
They're almost stopped.
They're almost stopped. You're almost not breathing, right? And so, almost suspended. We are laid asleep in body and become a living soul. Now, the person is not dead. It does not mean that the person died. It means that suddenly you encounter something and your reason is suspended. You're not worried about whether you can touch it or weigh it or hear it or tell the colors of it. You just encounter it and you become a living soul. He is here trying to, Wordsworth is encouraging us to overcome the despotism of the I. Overcome the despotism of the I, which means he wants us to stop relying on science to explain everything, suspend our reason, and in fact, stop worrying about what you can see. And it's like, when you, it's almost like, some people will kind of meditate to pray, or they want to get in a really quiet place. Why do you close your eyes when you pray? You can concentrate, right? So that stuff coming in this way isn't bothering you. And hopefully you can kind of calm down, and so that your heart's not racing and you're not breathing heavy, you're just kind of very relaxed. And then some people would almost encounter God with this mystical experience. You are asleep in body, but the soul becomes alive. We become a living soul. While with an I made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. Okay, now I've read almost that entire thing, and we'll have to go back through and figure out what the important lines are. But it's that whole idea that the I is made quiet so you can see something of the spirit, see something transcendent, right? And the I is made quiet so that we can encounter the sublime. And he says that's what happened. 5 years ago, he went to this place while he was gone, or while he was there 5 years ago. He encountered beautiful things or impressive things, spots of time. He remembered them. And then in poetry is half perceived and half created. So he wrote the poetry, which was the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility, but it's not just what he experienced there. Through the poetry, he's able to include something that hopefully he can allow the reader to have that momentary suspension of reason. encounter something transcendent, the sublime, overcome the despotism of the eye, and stop worrying about classifying the flower according to its genus and species or whatever, and just enjoy the beauty of the flower, the symmetry, the whatever. And so what he's saying is that over here on 800, this is, yes?
Can you repeat what you're saying?
For all of that? Okay, 5 years ago, he went to Tintern Abbey, experienced a spot of time or several. He remembered them when he went back to the city, and then he wrote his poetry, which isn't just, it's not a journalist's record, right? Instead, it's some unremembered pleasure as well. So he's including something of the sublime. So we can experience that momentary suspension of reason, that encounter with something transcendent. We're not going to rely on science and what we can empirically know. And so we get this in The World is Too Much With Us on page 800 to 801. It's a shorter poem, but you kind of can see where he's going here. If you think in terms of science, industrialism, we've got, if you think about, at this time, you have the factories and the sweatshops in London. You've got, at this point, you don't have people knowing that the smoke causes so much illness and the coal and all of that. So there aren't all these regulations that say smokestacks have to be so high. Why are smokestacks so tall on factories? It's so that the stuff that comes out of them goes way up into the atmosphere and we don't breathe it. At this time, the chimneys and the smokestacks wouldn't have been that high. So you've got all this soot and yucky stuff that everybody in London is breathing, and everything turns black and yucky, and it's just dirty and it's foggy and as well. So it's not a healthy place. But that's what industrialization does. I like the fact that you can mass produce stuff that I need. I mean, I'm not bashing all industrialization, but that's what it was. That's the effect that it's having here with the chimney sweeper poems with Blake and things like that. So you've got industrialization, you have slums and overcrowding in London and all of this. You've also got science explaining everything away. People are rushing around in the cities to get things done. People think that they understand everything, but look at the pain it's causing. So he says, the world is too much with us. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. This sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. It moves us not. It being nature, the sea, all that. Great God, I'd rather be a pagan, suckled in a creed outworn. So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn, have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, and hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. Now at this point, the sea is nice and peaceful and calm and everything, and if you go down to the Gulf and you look out at the sea, what's it made up of? Water. Is it just water, H2O? What else is in there? Fish. Sodium. NaCl. What else is in there? Did you know there's
ecosystem? There's everything.
It's an ecosystem, right? It's a system.
Yes.
Ecosystem, right? Yes. They all can keep each other alive and all this. It's a system. Now, if you're standing there on the pier and you're looking out and you say H2O, NaCl, and there's also chlorine. I don't know what the symbol for chlorine is. There's Cl. Oh, good. Okay. Oh, okay. And so there's actually more chlorine than there is sodium, I think, apparently, in the water. I don't know. But yeah, there's all of this that's out there, and it's an ecosystem, right, that must be kept in balance and everything. But he says, that's not very moving to know that it's just the chemicals that are out there, right? And he says, I wish I were a pagan. I would rather be a pagan, suckled in a creed outworn. So that looking out there, When there's a big wave, he might see Proteus or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn, right? So, I mean, that would be more moving. There's life to it. There's meaning. And if you think about it kind of in terms of hurricanes even, if a hurricane comes in and wipes out your house, it's kind of hard to be mad at a low pressure system of winds of a certain speed and temperature and an ecosystem and H2O and NaCl, right? It's hard to be mad at that. And this is where they kind of are at this point and in the Victorian era. How do you explain that hurricane wiped out your house? Well, the low pressure system, blah, 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 came in at this angle, blah, 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 and the barometer read, blah, blah, blah. That's not, it's like, you can get mad, but who are you mad at? There's a sense in which if you leave God out of the picture, and if you leave anything supernatural or transcendent out of the picture, you come up against this wall if there's no meaning to it, right? And that's what they're dealing with here. He says, I'll take being a pagan so I can see something in it, right? And so he wants something to interact with. He wants to see life in nature, because if we're the top, it's very disconcerting. So he's looking for the sublime. He goes looking for the sublime, something transcendent, so that he is writing in a world that is bigger. He needs a home that is bigger than the world that he lives in, which is just a natural world. So he's looking for something transcendent. You get that here. You get that cry for that in The World is Too Much With Us, and you get that in his sense of remembering those spots of time. Through poetry, he tries to provide that. And so he talks about, okay, back on 793, 793, he talks about line 61, so he's standing here, okay? He remembered what he did experience, and now he's in the present at this point, at a few miles above Tintern Abbey, blah, blah, blah. While here I stand, not only with the sense of present pleasure, but with pleasing thoughts that in this moment there is life and food for future years. So he is now back there, and he realizes he's looking at these beautiful scenes, and he knows that those will provide possibilities of life and food and hope and meaning for future years, because again, he's in a spot of time. He can go home and remember and write poetry, which here we've got the poem that then is after this spot of time, right? And then if we look at 794, okay, on 794 we've got, let me see, I'll give you 2 lines from 793 so it makes sense. The sounding cataract haunted me like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, and the deep and gloomy wood, their colors and their forms were then to me an appetite, a feeling and a love that had no need of remoter charm. When he was younger, he was just happy to go see the woods and the mountains and all that. It was just kind of immediate pleasure, just happy as a young person. No need of remoter charm by thought supplied, nor any interest unborrowed from the eye. That time is past, all its aching joys, dizzy raptures, and all of that. But, he says at line 86 at the end, other gifts have followed. For such loss I would believe abundant recompense, for I have learned to look on nature, not as in the hour of thoughtless youth. You know, a child doesn't go out and think about God and the whirlwind, or children don't think about their own mortality, or this won't last long, or is there something bigger than me, right? Just thoughtless youth. They just enjoy it. But when you get older, he says, but hearing oftentimes the still sad music of humanity, nor harsh nor grating, though of ample power to chasten and subdue. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime. And this sense sublime is appropriate more to the light of setting suns. because it's like death, thinking of death, and I'm kind of skipping through the lines here. If you look at line 99, and in the mind of man, okay, a motion, the sublime, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things. That sublime gives us all power and life, all objects of thought, and rolls through all things. So he still loves the meadows and the woods and all of this, but at line 106, he loves all those things that he can experience through eye and ear, both what they half create and what perceive. And so he's talking about the fact that through poetry, it's half created and it's half perceived. Because he takes the poetry, just like, you know, he's not just being the youth who's going to experience it in the immediate present. He's not doing that. It's the more mature human who reflects on it and gives it deeper meaning. Okay. Okay. I'm going to stop talking for a minute to let it sink in. Okay, the sublime, yes. To repeat the definition of the sublime. Actually, I'll give you an official definition next time, but like a real formal definition. But yes, it involves the momentary suspension of reason, and it's something transcendent. So it requires that you suspend your reason, you encounter something transcendent, and it's appropriate to things like storms, God in the whirlwind for Job, ruins, like ruined castles, because you're going, wow, life is very short. Even
you say it's like it's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming, yeah, because you put aside all of this, what your eyes and ears can comprehend, yeah. And it's not something that a child would encounter, right? A child wouldn't. It'd be very, children don't typically think of their mortality. They don't think about the darkness and the meaning of the world, right? They're just immediate. But when we get older, there's something darker, and it's harder to enjoy the beautiful sunset because you know that you've got to pick up something at Walmart before all the crazy people get there at 5 o'clock. And so, yeah, it's pretty. Come on, I don't want to get stuck in line at Walmart, right? So you don't enjoy that. But then the poet comes along and he looks at what he enjoyed in his youth and he says, look, life is short. Our mortality limits us. Our minds, we're just limited. We're not eternal and omnipotent and all of that. And Wordsworth is not looking at this from a Christian perspective, so he's looking for something bigger than himself. And so he finds that in nature. And that's why, remember I gave you the three things with, there's anticipation, consummation, lamentation. Okay, like the anticipate, I don't know, there are also kind of three stages of the poet for Wordsworth. Three stages of the poet. And we can do a little bit with this today. There are three stages of the poet. And this is an ode on intimations of immortality. But there are three stages that almost sound like those three kinds of lyric. These are the three stages of the poet, being the person, not the poetry itself. But like a child is just in unity with nature. You know, they go until they get done by ants, I guess. They just say, wow, it's beautiful. I like the butterflies and the rabbits and whatever. It's just they're at one with nature. Then the adult, there's a break. They can't enjoy nature. And then we have the poet who finds something beyond. It's a more mature reflection on nature. and it's a more mature reflection or encounter with nature where something transcendent is found. So there is a regain and more mature unity with nature. And it's more mature because then you're able to appreciate the beauty of nature and the meaning because you're able to experience the sublime there and see the working of something transcendent. But what that is really not clear for Wordsworth. It's really, really unclear. Okay. Yes, we can. I think we're going to stop now.